Do you belong to one of the oldest Highland clan names in Scotland? Well, these are the 7 oldest Highland clan names still in use today, and for this video, I have defined oldest in a looser way. I previously made a video on the oldest clan surnames with a much stricter definition, basically when they first appear in the historical record, with many lowland and Norman clans on the list. But in this video, I'm not just hunting for the first parchment spelling of the surname as we know today. Medieval Gaelic naming didn't work like that. A person's identity came from their father, territory, occupation or kindred, and only gradually did some of these identities harden into hereditary surnames. Instead, I'm looking at the earliest traceable identity behind the modern clan name. Sometimes the first written surname, sometimes the man who gave the clan its name, and sometimes a strong tradition preserving an older identity. As long before permanent surnames, Scotland was already divided into named peoples, dynasties and king groups that behaved surprisingly like the clans that came later. So in this video, we will define oldest as where tradition and evidence reasonably meet. Now number 7 on the list is one of the most famous Scottish clan surnames, MacDonald. And few names are more tied to the Highlands and Islands. The Donald in question was Donald Mac Ragnall, grandson of the famous Somerled, who lived in the late 12th and early 13th centuries and became the ancestor of Clan Donald. His descendants eventually built the Lordship of the Isles, a maritime power operating almost like a kingdom within the kingdom. And it's a perfect example of how a clan surname formed. First there was Donald, then his sons were literally MacDonald or son of Donald, and eventually their descendants collectively became known as Clan Donald or Clan Donald. The surname became clearer in the 13th century, but its ancestral name root belongs to around 1200. Now I should also quickly mention that MacDougall also deserves a mention as they have similar origins, and Dougal was actually a son of Somerled, meaning MacDougall actually takes his name from the earlier generation. But I have made a separate video on location and Skye on Norse clans of Viking or Norse origin in more detail that you should check out if you haven't seen it before. Now number 6 on the list is MacPhee, a name that has a very interesting origin and potentially connects to the Gaelic supernatural world. The Gaelic name is Mac Du She, combining Du meaning dark with She meaning peace. Yet She also carries supernatural associations in Gaelic culture, as it's also connected to older Celtic terms linked to fairy mounds, the underground or green hill dwellings of the good people, which connects to the other world. Thus, the Gaelic name is sometimes translated as son of the dark fairy. Now in 1164, the year Somerled was killed at Renfrew, the annals record a Du She who was a lector or senior scholar of Iona. A later MacPhee genealogy also traces the family through a Du She, and historians have suggested the two could be the same man. It can't be proven, but the date, name and geography make it an intriguing possibility. Now the MacPhees became associated with Colonsay, close to Iona, so their surname may preserve the name of an educated churchman. A reminder that early Gaelic kindreds also contained hereditary clerics, poets, judges and physicians. Now next up is MacLachlan or MacLachlan, which is particularly interesting because here we can combine a medieval clan founder with a much older genealogy that historians have taken surprisingly seriously. The name comes from Lachlan Moore, the 13th century figure remembered as the clan's ancestor. The personal name Lachlan, from the older Gaelic Loch Lan, originally referred to Scandinavia or a Norseman or stranger, and their historic seat was Old Castle Lachlan, a ruined 15th century castle on the shore of Loch Fyne. But under a looser definition, the story begins much earlier. Medieval genealogies place the clan's ancestors amongst a group of powerful families in Cowell and Knapdale, traditionally descended from Anne O'Neill, an Irish prince who supposedly settled in western Scotland in the 11th century. What's unusual is that this genealogy isn't simply a hopeless leap into legend, with some historians finding some supporting evidence. By the 13th century, the family was firmly established around Loch Fyne, with the kindred that produced the MacLachlans appearing in contemporary charters. so the ancestral kindred behind the surname may plausibly be traced into the 1000s, which makes the clan one of the strongest candidates on the list, whose documented medieval name sits on top of a considerably older Gaelic bloodline. Now, number 4 on the list is actually my surname, Macmillan, and let me know what your surname is in the comments below. Now, the name Macmillan comes from the Gaelic name Mac Muelan, basically meaning something like son of the tonsured one. Now, the clan's origins are closely connected to the medieval Gaelic church, and possibly to one of the most famous manuscripts in Scottish history, the Book of Deer. This book was probably produced in the first half of the 10th century. But in the 12th century, Gaelic notes recording land grants and local events were added to its margins. These notes are especially important because they contain some of the earliest surviving continuous Gaelic writing from Scotland. Now, one of those records, dating to around 1131 to 1132, lists among its witnesses a man called Gaelicreos MacCormac, literally Gil Christ, son of Cormac. Intriguingly, the same record also names Cormac, Bishop of Dunkeld, so many have inferred this was his father. This Gil Christ is then identified in Macmillan tradition and genealogy with the clan's ancestral Muelan. The name is derived from this Gaelic word, meaning something like bald, shaven or tonsured. And in the medieval church, monks and clerics often shave part of their head as a sign of religious status and devotion, known as the tonsure. Therefore, Macmillan means something like son of the tonsured one, so very much a religious origin. So, unlike a clan founder who exists only in much later legend, a man called Gilchrist, son of Cormac, really does appear in a Scottish document from around 1131 to 1132. At roughly the period in which Macmillan tradition places the early ancestor of the clan. So while the exact identification remains uncertain, there may genuinely be a glimpse here of the man who stood near the beginning of the Macmillan story. Now, third on the list is MacGregor, the outlawed royal race. And although the first confirmed chief of the clan doesn't really appear until the 14th century in the form of Gregor of the Golden Bridles MacGregor, the deeper traditions are much older. The MacGregors have long claimed membership of the ancient Shiel Alpin, or the Seed of Alpin. This is a family of 7 clans claiming descent from Alpin, which tradition says was the king of the ancient Gaelic kingdom of Dalriada in the 9th century. And his son was Kenneth MacAlpin, who is said to have unified the Picts and the Gaels in 843 AD into the embryonic kingdom of Scotland, or Alapa. There is also a tradition that Gregor was the brother of Kenneth MacAlpin, although this is debated. Yet importantly, we know this wasn't simply invented by Victorian clan writers. In a 1591 bond, Alexander MacGregor of Glenstray and a member of Clan Macaulay described themselves and their people as MacAlpins of old, or MacAlpins of old. Now, this obviously doesn't prove descent from Kenneth MacAlpin, but it does prove that the tradition existed centuries before the Victorian romanticisation of clans. Some reconstructions also place an Alpin around 1100 at the head of the Glenorchy kindred from which the MacGregor clan later emerged. And the clan obviously went on to become one of Britain's great stories of survival. After Glenfruin in 1603, James VI prescribed the name itself, forcing many MacGregors to live under other surnames for a time, including Rob Roy MacGregor or Campbell. So the MacGregors prove the central point of the list. A clan identity can plausibly be older than the surname we now associate with it. Now, number 2 on the list is MacNab, and here we move clearly into the borderland between history and ancient tradition. The meaning is wonderfully straightforward, son of the abbot, placing the origin among the ecclesiastical families of Gaelic Scotland. Tradition makes the ancestor and abbot associated with Clondalkin, sometimes identified as Oraru, the Red Abbot. Now, Oraru was allegedly a younger son of Kenneth MacAlpin, the first king of Scots, according to some traditions. And according to others, Oraru was also said to be descended from Fergus, king of Dalriada in the 8th century, and a nephew of St. Fillan, who was the founder of a monastery in Glendochart in the 7th century. And although proving the direct genealogy is difficult this far back, the links are ancient, and the underlying religious mechanism is entirely believable. Glendochart has ancient ecclesiastical associations centred around St. Fillan, an early medieval saint whose cult remained important for centuries. The surviving crozier associated with him is itself an early medieval object, later enclosed in a more elaborate medieval shrine. So despite definitive proof being difficult, so many parts of the MacNab origin story make it plausible that the real clan, grew out of this backdrop. A powerful family descended from, or attached to, an abbot, becoming the sons of the abbots, which makes perfect historical sense. Now at number 1 on the list we have MacAlpin, which simply means son of Alpin. And what makes this name incredibly interesting is we actually see forms of this name well over 1,000 years ago in the Scottish historical record, connected to ancient rulers in the 9th century and even among ancient Pictish kings. The most famous example is Kenneth MacAlpin, of course, son of Alpin, with the seed of Alpin also said to have given rise to 7 other clans: Clan Grant, Gregor, Macaulay, MacPhee, MacKinnon, MacNab and Macquarie. Now, Kenneth MacAlpin died in 858 and is traditionally remembered as the man who brought the Gaelic Scots or Gaelic Scots and the Picts under one dynasty, helping to create the political kingdom that gradually developed into Alapa or medieval Scotland. Thus, he is sometimes referred to as the first king of the Scots. His descendants and house continued to rule, which is why Kenneth is often treated as the founding figure of the Scottish monarchy. Even though Scotland as a unified kingdom developed over several generations, rather than appearing suddenly in his lifetime, he therefore sits at a major turning point in Scottish history. After Kenneth, the separate identities of the Pictish and Gaelic kingdoms increasingly gave way to the Kingdom of Alapa or Scotland. And Kenneth wasn't the only one. His brother and successor, Donal MacAlpin, who ruled after him from 858 to 862. So MacAlpin genuinely belonged to the 9th century royal family. Though the enormous caveat is this was still a patronymic, not a hereditary surname in the modern sense, and we can't demonstrate an uninterrupted father-to-son MacAlpin surname running from the 9th century to people who bear the name today. Yet the modern clan MacAlpin does claim royal descent from Kenneth MacAlpin, and we know similar names appear among earlier Pictish rulers. For instance, Alpin I is listed as king of the Picts from 726 to 728. And the word itself, the Gaelic word Alpin, means white or pure. And the etymology suggests a connection to the landscape of Scotland, where the word may evoke the imagery of the snow-capped peaks we see in the mountains here. So MacAlpin is extraordinary. The basic name for him, underlying the modern MacAlpin identity, can be seen more than 1,100 years ago, and even connects to ancient Pictish rulers. So although most surviving clan surnames became securely visible between roughly the 12th and 14th centuries, basically when Scottish surnames really became common as we recognise today, the kindreds and the identities behind them are often considerably older. Now I should quickly note that several other Highland names could reasonably challenge for a place on the list. MacKinnon, Macquarie, MacNeil all preserve ancient genealogical traditions, while MacNaughton and Campbell have especially strong medieval documentary evidence. MacLean also traces its name to an early medieval ancestor, although the earliest documentary evidence is less straightforward. But what are the 7 oldest Scottish clan surnames if we use a much stricter definition? Well, to find out, please click here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and hit the bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.